The 2026 Commonwealth Games are now in doubt. This is after the Australian state of Victoria pulled out of hosting the Games. It has now left organisers worried as the hunt for a new venue continues. So why has Victoria pulled out suddenly? The Commonwealth Games had been struggling to find a host for the Games. That's when Victoria stepped in. Organisers originally estimated that the event would cost around 2.6 billion Australian dollars. That's around 1.8 billion American dollars. The state government billed it as a boost for the region. So the preparations kicked off. But now the cost has tripled to over 6 billion Australian dollars, which is around 4.7 billion American dollars, a hike that Victoria thinks doesn't benefit the state.
And look, I've made a lot of difficult calls, a lot of very difficult decisions in this job. This is not one of them. Frankly, $6 to $7 billion for a 12-day sporting event, we are not doing that. That does not represent value for money. That is all cost and no benefit.
The Victoria government now says it'll use the money it was saving for housing and tourism initiatives. So where will the Games be held now? Well, clearly not Australia. Neighbouring New South Wales said it would not step in. The state also cites budgetary pressures. The leaders of other Australian states, except of Queensland, poured cold water on the idea too. The Commonwealth Games are a multi-sport tournament. It's held every 4 years. The first Games were held in 1930. This was in Canada's Ontario. Since then, the Games have successfully run every 4 years. They've only been cancelled during the Second World War. So, can the Commonwealth find a new host city now? Well, the time is short. But the Games have a history of finding willing cities who are able to host at short notice. The same happened with the 2022 Games. South Africa's Durban won the rights in 2015, but Durban was stripped of the rights to host after failing to meet the promises made in its bid. So the UK's Birmingham stepped in to host the Games. This brings us to the relevance of the Commonwealth Games. It's a sporting event for mostly former British colonies. Only members of the Commonwealth can take part, but the Games have struggled to remain relevant. 5 out of the last 6 editions were held in Australia or Britain. In recent years, criticism of the Games has expanded beyond just the financial burden. The colonial origins of the Games have been slammed. They were once known as the British Empire Games, but now the empire no longer exists. And the Games are slowly becoming irrelevant. No one wants to host them, clearly.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.